On today's Washington Unplugged, Congressman Jim Moran, Frank Wolf, and Seeds of Terror author Gretchen Peters.
What to do about the prisoners at Guantanamo? It can come down to two congressional districts in Washington. The district of Democrat Jim Moran, who used to be the mayor of Alexandria, now he represents the city in Congress, and Congressman Frank Wolf, a Republican whose district abuts Congressman Moran's. I must say, Congressman, you have gone where few have been willing to tread lately in the United States Congress. You said that if push comes to shove, you would be willing, and the people in Alexandria would be willing to take these prisoners and keep them in the federal facility there in Alexandria. You've had some experience with that. You had some pretty famous terrorists to go on trial in Alexandria. Why did you decide to do this? This must have been a hard thing for you to say.
It was the right thing to do, and as you know, Bob, Alexandria has a long history. We're proud of our heritage. It was the hometown of George Washington, Robert E. Lee. We've developed from a small southern town to a very modern city. We have a federal courthouse that is one of the best in the nation, and we have a very secure facility with an excellent sheriff and sheriff's department. I know we can do this, and I know that we will do it because it's the right thing to do. So, it's a defining moment. I think you understand this, and most people do, in American history. What we do with hundreds of detainees, and we need to act in such a way that subsequent generations read this history and are proud of it rather than shamed by it.
Well, you are one of the few members of Congress. In fact, the Senate overwhelmingly told President Obama they would not give him the money to close this facility unless he could give them a plan, really, of what and how he planned to do this. What is it that people are worried about? I mean, I think I know some of the answers to this, but why is there such reluctance here?
A lot of this is the politics of fear. It's rhetoric. In the discussion in the Full Appropriations Committee and subsequently on the floor of the House, they referred to these terrorists as the worst of the worst, killers, and I think most normal people don't want people who represent any threat to them, even near them, even though it's in a secure prison. I think when confronted with the facts, though, and the alternatives to trying these people, most people will realize this is the rational thing to do. But as you know, we all have a limbic system that generates fear, and it trumps judgment and reason. But the reason we're a great country is because we've had leaders in the past, at least, who have been willing to reason with their constituents and to do the right thing. George Washington was one of those leaders when he made sure that none of his troops would torture the Hessians because we were a better people than that. I think that Barack Obama is one of those leaders because he is appealing to the better angels of our nature.
Well, one of those who is very much opposed to bringing these prisoners back is former Vice President Cheney. He came on pretty strong when he took on Barack Obama on this issue, really a debate that we never really had in the campaign, because in the campaign, of course, John McCain agreed with Barack Obama that we ought to close Guantanamo. What did you think of the Vice President's remarks?
I was glad that he was making those remarks, because that's the contrast that the nation needs to see. And really, this is a democracy. We need to choose between one and the other. This has been Dick Cheney's policy, I think, more than George Bush's policy. And now he's saying exactly what he thought, what drove that policy. And now it's up to those who disagree with that policy to not only explain what the consequences have been, but to explain why this is not a policy befitting of our nation, why it is contrary to the values and ideals that define us as a people.
Are you sure in your heart, Congressman, that the people of Alexandria will back you up on this, that they'll go along with this? You're saying it's the right thing to do, and that's why we need to do it. Are you sure that your constituents agree with you?
If I was counting constituent response, the answer would be they probably don't. And I understand that, but life's too short to just go along to get along. I think I have some responsibility to try to do the right thing as I see it. And I've been involved in this issue for a long time. The chair of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee asked me to be kind of the point person on Guantanamo, to understand it, to go down there, to find out who the prisoners were, why they were there, and to come up with some recommendations. Now, I do have some factual information behind that decision, so I think when you can make an informed decision that you believe is right, you just got to do it and let the consequences fall where they may. But it's Barack Obama versus Dick Cheney, a policy that he feels is more befitting the 21st century, and diplomatic alliances and kind of smart power versus Dick Cheney's approach. At one point, Vice President Cheney said, "We don't negotiate, we dominate." Well, that's one approach. Is it going to work in the 21st century? Does it really make us safer? I don't think so.
All right. Congressman Jim Moran, we're going to get another side of this story, a very different side of it now, when we talk to another Virginia Congressman, Frank Wolf, Republican of Virginia. And with us now, Congressman Frank Wolf of Virginia. His district abuts that of Congressman Jim Moran. Congressman Moran says the right thing to do is to accept these Gitmo prisoners in the Alexandria courts and put them in the Alexandria jail if that becomes necessary. Congressman Wolf, you take a different view on this.
Correct. There are two issues here. One, Eric Holder is talking about releasing the Uyghur detainees. The Uyghur detainees are part of a releasing, not just transfer, but releasing in the community, are part of a group called the Eastern Turkmenistan Islamic Movement. They're on the terrorist list. They've all gone through training camps at Tora Bora, Al-Qaeda-run training camps, and their leader is a fellow named Abdul Haq, who the Obama administration last month just put again personally on the terrorist financing list. So that's one group that I think if you're going to release them, they should be released somewhere abroad. Other Uyghur detainees were released in Albania, and I think that's appropriate, but not here in the United States. Also, there's potential radicalization, having been at Guantanamo for 7 years. The other issue is when you close down Guantanamo, as I'm sure it will be closed down, as they're saying, what do you do? And they were talking about bringing someone like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the one who beheaded, if you recall, Daniel Pearl, and also was the mastermind of 9/11, which led to the death of 3,000 people, 30 from my congressional district. To bring him to Alexandria, where Misali was tried, is inappropriate, because when Misali was tried, Alexandria was totally different. Now, since that time, there's a new Westin hotel directly across the street from the courthouse. There's a brand new condo, the Carlisle, onto the other side, and the government has now built the Patent and Trademark Office with up to 5,000 employees, and there's a new ramp coming down from the Beltway. And since these Al-Qaeda people have this unwritten code that they will attempt to rescue one another, my point is Alexandria is not the place.
Well,
they should do it somewhere on a military base in a rural area away from a metropolitan area. So that's the issue here. Do you do it in an urban area, or do you do it in a rural area on a military base? And I think it ought to be done in a rural area on a military base.
Well, they're going to have to put them somewhere. I mean
understand
that's for
correct.
sure. As you say, if the president does, as he has said he is going to do, close down Guantanamo.
Correct. Yes.
But let me ask you this. I mean, we've got some pretty good supermax federal prisons in this country. Nobody has ever escaped from any of those. Are we just saying that our prisons are not good enough to hold?
No, I was chairman of the committee that had the jurisdiction over the FBI and the Bureau of Prisons, and I'm now the ranking member. If you recall, Officer Pepe was stabbed in the eye by one of these individuals. Sheikh Rahman, who was in prison now in a supermax, was transferring information from his lawyer out to a terrorist. And lastly, if you recall, if you check the records, people convicted for the World Trade Center bombing #1 were in communication with the Madrid bombers in Spain. And one of the biggest problems is the radicalization in prison. In fact, the 4 individuals that I looked at the report that were arrested yesterday up in the New York City area were radicalized, some of them in prison. So I'm saying you need to present a plan on where you're going to do this. Wherever Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is tried, he will probably be there for 5 to 6 to 7 years. And what I'm saying is, we're not saying you can't close down Guantanamo. We're saying you can't try and bring someone to Alexandria for 4 or 5 or 6 years with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who there may very well be a rescue attempt. As you recall for the other trials, there's some potential problems that the witnesses fear intimidation, the jury members feel intimidation, the judges are potentially threatened. So we're saying Alexandria is not the place. It has to be on a rural area, probably, Bob, on a military base.
Are you saying, though, that it's going to take 5 or 6 or 7 years to get these trials done? Is that?
Miss Sally was in Alexandria for over 4 years. The trial for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed will probably be 4 or 5, and I think he'll appeal to the Supreme Court because it will probably be a death penalty case. I assume Eric Holder will do that. And I think he could be wherever he is taken before there is an end of this for 5 to 6, and some trial lawyers say up to potentially 6.5 years. So wherever he will go, you will have that for that long period of time. The other problem, Bob, is that there was a court case. Judge Bates ruled that 3 of the inmates in Bagram outside of Kabul, will also be entitled to these. So if there is a decision made that what you're ever given to the Guantanamo people should also be with regard to Bagram, this would go on forever. And you would literally tie up. I mean, the mayor of Alexandria is supposed to. So we're not saying you never try them. We're saying you don't do it in Alexandria. You would do it in a rural area. And I believe the most appropriate place would probably be on a military base.
All right, Congressman Frank Wolf, who underlines, and I think this is one thing we can all agree on, saying you're going to close Guantanamo is one thing, figuring out how to do it is a little more complicated. Thank you very much, Congressman.
Okay, thank you.
You're watching Washington Unplugged. So, Gretchen Peters is a longtime reporter for the Associated Press and later ABC News. She has a new book out called Seeds of Terror, and it is about the criminal underpinnings of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Gretchen, welcome to the broadcast. We think of these groups as being religious zealots, but in fact it's a lot more complicated and more than that.
It's a lot more complex, and some of them have different intentions, and I'm not suggesting that Al-Qaeda has put aside its intention to attack the United States and the West, but increasingly all of these various extremist group, insurgent groups operating along the Afghan-Pakistan border are engaging in criminal activity: drug smuggling, gun running, kidnapping, human trafficking, gemstone smuggling, selling antiquities on the black market, all sorts of stuff. And when you start to examine their operations, they start to look a lot more like members of the mafia than mujahideen.
So how much of their money are they getting from these illicit activities? Let's talk about the drug trade, for example.
Well, the United Nations estimates that the Taliban alone, I'm talking about the Afghan Taliban, earns $400 million every year off of the opium trade. That's just the opium trade. I put their earnings more at, closer to $500 million a year. That's just Mullah Omar's gang. It's complicated to explain how I got to that number, but you very, very easily get to that figure. Whatever they're earning, it is an astonishing amount of money. It's more than it costs them to run their operations. And by my estimates, some of the regional and international terror groups like Al-Qaeda and some of their affiliates, they could be earning even more.
There's all this controversy. There still is spirited discussion on what is the right way to go after the Taliban, to go after Al-Qaeda along this border. Are we doing enough to try to cut them off from this money that they're obviously using to finance their operations?
I think we're not doing nearly enough. That's a very good question, Bob, because one of the key aspects of any counterinsurgency strategy is to cut the enemy off from their source of funding. And we have done virtually nothing to go after the money that is behind all of this. There have been lots of talk about spraying the poppy fields or legalizing the poppy crop. The money is not in the farmlands. The money is in the refineries. It's in the drug convoys leaving the areas. It's in the money laundering that takes place not only in Pakistan and Dubai and places like that, but even in Western banking institutions. We need to start following the money.
And how do we do that?
Well, it will take an international effort. I'm not suggesting that it will be easy. I also suggest that there has to be real development of these border areas. As we fan more troops out into the area, I think there should be some kind of civilian surge of people to bring schools, better health care. When the research that I did in these border areas using, in part using some very brave local assistance in the most dangerous areas, over and over, I heard that people wanted schools. They wanted schools for girls. There's a misperception here that the people in the border areas are radical fundamentalists. They're not. Their lives are being chewed up by this extremism and terrorism, and we owe it to ourselves as much as we owe it to them to provide a better life for them out there.
How much corruption is there now in the Afghan government?
Corruption within the Afghan government is going to be the biggest challenge for us in the region. And let me add that it's not just the Afghan government. Corruption goes to the very top in the Pakistan government, and there's a tremendous corruption problem in Iran as well because of the drug trade, which envelops all of these areas, as well actually up in Central Asia. To my mind, the biggest challenge out there is not the fact that we're fighting enemies that are making millions of dollars off of criminal activity. It's that our so-called allies in the region are incredibly unreliable.
So we're seeing in those areas the same kinds of impact that you would have on a local government in this country. What we're seeing is what's happening in Mexico. They're buying off these officials, and they're doing it with drug money. Absolutely,
and we often compare the war in Afghanistan to the war in Iraq. It's a lot more like the situation in Colombia. Very messy. Everybody often says, well, when I talk about this issue, people routinely say to me, the last thing we want is to get sucked into another messy drug war like Colombia. And I say, too late. We're already in a drug war, whether we like it or not out there.
All right. Gretchen Peters.
Thank you.
And her new book is Seeds of Terror. That's it for Washington Unplugged. Don't forget to watch us on television Sunday when our guest is going to be on Face the Nation, Colin Powell. Good day.